Hey gang, welcome back to Inverted Pursuits Laboratory. This week we're going to talk about a concept that I learned about pretty recently and thought I should go over in a little more detail to help kind of like share with the community and help you guys understand an interesting concept, but something that can get you in a lot of trouble if you don't know what you're doing. So altimeters that we use in our high power rocketry to deploy charges and deploy our drogue parachutes or main parachute at the desired time have several different ways of working. Majority of the time, especially when we're doing dual deploy, which is more specifically what I'm talking about, we have a drogue and a main charge. Our drogue charge goes off at somewhere near apogee, and our main charge goes off at a desired altitude. So recently I learned that there are two different ways that we can do that drogue charge. Most people do apogee. So that drogue charge will go off at the top of your arc. So the moment the rocket's usually parallel or stopped going up, your altimeter is no longer reading vertical motion up and a low acceleration. It will deploy your parachute and then you'll come down slowly. Actually, well, usually you'll deploy a drogue and you'll come down, and then later your main will come apart. But I learned that there are a couple altimeters out there that do what's called nose over. So rather than going off at apogee, they wait until the rocket is completely turned upside down and started to come back down before deploying your parachute. This got me in trouble on the flight of my rocket Festus. So I was flying two different altimeters. One used apogee deployment, the other used nose over. I was flying the one that used nose over as my primary, so in my opinion, I didn't know the difference between apogee and nose over. I was like, probably close enough to the same thing, that I set my secondary, which was the apogee deploy usually, to apogee plus a second. Now what ended up happening is that nose over and apogee plus a second occurred at the exact same time, which means I blew both charges simultaneously. And nose over is not an exact science. It's about the time when your rocket's no longer going up and is pretty well turned over to deploy your charge. And there's some different theories on whether that's better than like truly deploying at apogee, because sometimes at apogee you're still pointing up, sometimes you've tipped over. It's not a precise science is where you're at, whereas nose over, they can pretty well go, you're going down. I'm personally a bigger fan of deploying at apogee than at nose over. I would prefer my redundant go off at nose over. But that nose over tends to float somewhere between what would be apogee plus 1 second or apogee plus 2 seconds is the approximate time frame for nose over on the majority of rockets that I've seen with what limited research I've done. There's probably more in there that you can actually get a pretty good range, but apogee plus 1 to apogee plus 2 is what I've been seeing. Now I can also set my nose over altimeter to do like nose over plus a second, nose over plus 10 seconds to say like I want to start coming down further before I deploy that charge. I'm personally not a fan of waiting. I like to try and get things off when the rocket's going as slow as it possibly can be, because when you're going fast and you deploy things, now you're dealing with parachutes opening up and you've got a higher chance of zippering with shock cords. It's a very dangerous game to play. But that little concept there of what apogee is versus nose over is something I feel like isn't talked enough about in the rocketry community. I found a couple articles on it here and there, and I'll try and find a couple of those and link them down below, so when you guys are viewing this you can also go read up on it. But I highly recommend you go to the Rocketry forum, do some research on the differences between apogee and nose over, and get better acquainted with it, so that if you buy an altimeter that mentions that it deploys its first charge, or what's usually our drogue charge, at nose over, you understand what that means. Majority of the ones I've encountered though do apogee, not nose over. Nose over is a little more rare, but when you run into it, it's important to know what it is. So thanks for watching, gang. That's all I've got for you this week. Fly safe, and I'll see you all in the next video.